Daf Yomi, Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 40. Daf Mem, starting from the bottom of 39b, at the bottom. V'taris she'enon teruva, last line. V'taris she'enon teruva tanu rabbanan ezehu. Ezohi, taris she'enon teruva. Kol sherosh v'shidra nika. V'ezot tzir sheyesh badaga. Kol shekilbis achas o shtei kilbios. The Mishnah further teaches, and tarit, fish that is not minced, and brine that has fish in it are permitted. The sages taught what is considered tarit that has not been minced: any fish whose head and spine are recognizable. And what is considered brine that has fish in it? Any brine that has 1 kilbit or 2 kilbiot. And now we go to 40 on the top of Mem Amud Aleph. Shotetot bo. Hashta kilbit achatim amar sharei. Shnei kilbiot mibaye. Lo kasha. Kan bipituchot. Kan bistumot. Now we're floating in it. What was it? Any brine that has 1 kilbit or 2 kilbiot floating in it. The Gemara asks, now that you have said that brine, which has only 1 kilbit, is permitted, is it necessary to teach that brine has 2 kilbiot in it is also permitted? The Gemara explains that it is not difficult. Here, 2 kilbiot are required to permit brine, as it is contained in open barrels, but there only 1 is required since it is in sealed barrels. Itmar. We learned Yehoshua Amal Ajitehei, in brackets says Sheyehei, Rosh v'Shidra Nikal Rav Nachman or Rosh o Shidra Meisiv Rav Ukva Bar Chama ובדוגים כל שיש לו ישנה ביר וגסגסס. וברביי כי תניא היא ואוראו בלמודה דידמו רשאיו לתמאים. It was stated that Rav Huna said tarit is not permitted for consumption until its head and spine are recognizable. Rav Nachman says it is permitted if either the head or the spine is recognizable. Rav Ukva Bar Chama raises an objection from a Mishnah in 59a. And with regard to fish, any that has fins and scales is permitted. Evidently, the kashrut of fish is determined only by its fins and scales, not its head or its spine. Abaye said when that Mishnah is taught, it is in reference to the Ara'ah and Falmuda fish, whose heads are similar to the heads of non-kosher fish. Amar Rav Yehuda Mishmei De'ula Machloikes Litabel B'tziron Al Rigufan Devera Kol Asu Ad Shehei Rosh V'Shidra Nikao Amar V'Zera Amaresh Have mitabelna betziran kevan nishamana v'hadi amar Yehuda Mishmei De'ula machloikis letabel betziran al regufan devrei kol asu ad she'rosh v'shidra nikal betziran amilo mitabelna. The Gemara analyzes the dispute between Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Rav Yehuda said, in the name of Ula, the dispute applies to dipping foods in their brine, but with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine are recognizable. The Gemara notes that Rav Zera said, originally I would dip foods in their brine, but once I heard that which Rav Yehuda said in the name of Ula, the dispute is only with regard to dipping foods in their brine, but with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine are recognizable. I too no longer dip foods in their brine. אמר רב פאפא הלכתה עד שיהיה ראש ושדרה ניכר של כל אחת ביחד מטבעי. החתיכות שיש בהן סימן בין בכולן בין במקצתן ואפילו באחד ממאה שבהן כולם מותרות. ומעשה בגוי אחד שבגריו של חתיכות ונמצא סימן באחת מהן והתירה בשמעון בן גמליאל את הגריו כולו. Rav Papa said, the halacha is that tarit is prohibited until the head and spine of each and every fish is recognizable. The Gemara raises an objection to Rav Papa's statement from a Braita with regard to pieces of fish that have a sign of kashrut. Whether this sign is present in all of them or only in a minority of them, and even if it is present in only one fish out of 100 of them, they are all permitted. And there was an incident involving a certain Gentile who brought a large jug of pieces of fish, and a sign of kashrut was found in one of them, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel permitted the entire jug of fish. This apparently contradicts Rav Papa's assertion that all the pieces must be recognizable for them to be permitted. Targema Rav Papa כשחתיכות שוות החימה אל ממרא מהו דתמה נחוש תלמה איתרמי כמשמע. Rav Papa interpreted that Braita as referring to a case where the pieces correspond to each other, meaning they fit together so that it is clear that they are all from the same fish. The Gemara raises a difficulty. If that is so, what is the purpose of stating this explicitly? If the pieces correspond, it is obvious that they are permitted as if they evidently come from the same kosher fish. The Gemara explains that this was taught lest you say that one should be concerned that perhaps the pieces merely happened to fit together. The Braita therefore teaches us that in such a case the pieces are permitted. Hau arba ditzachanta deatai lesichra nafak ravuna bar chinina v'chazabe kilfe v'sharye amar le Rava mi ikadishare kahai gavna ve'atra tishchichi kilfe nafak shipure l'Rava yasar shipure l'Ravuna bar chinina v'sharye. The Gemara relates that there was a certain ship carrying tzachanta which came to the city of Sikra. Rav Huna bar Chinina went out and saw that the fish had scales on them and permitted them, as any fish with scales is kosher. Rava said to him, but is there anyone who permits tzachanta in a case like this, when it is from a land where fish with scales are common, and it is very possible that the scales are from kosher fish that had been in the boat previously? Shofarot went out from the court of Rava to herald a declaration promulgating his ruling, and he thereby prohibited all the fish on that boat. And Shofarot went out from the court of Rav Huna bar Chinina, and he thereby permitted the fish. Amar Rav Medivti Lididi Amar li Rav Papi Ki Shara Rav Huna bar Chinina B'tziran Aval Begufan lo Amar Ravashi Lididi Amar li Rav Papa Ki Shara Rav Huna bar Chinina Afilu Begufan. The Gemara presents two interpretations of the above ruling. Rav Yirmiyah of Difti said, Rav Papi said to me, that when Rav Huna bar Chinina permitted the fish on the ship, he he was referring only to their brine, but with regard to their bodies, no, he did not permit them. Rav Ashi said, Rav Papa said to me that when Rav Huna bar Chinna permitted the fish, he was referring even to their bodies. V'ana lo me'sara asarna deka amar li Rav Papa v'lo mishre sharina deha amar li Rav Yehuda mishmei de'ula machloikes etav b'tzirana b'gufan divrei akol ad shehei roish v'shitra nikar shel kol echad v'echad. Rav Ashi continued, and I do not prohibit the fish, as Rav Papa said to me, that Rav Huna permitted it, but I also do not permit the fish, as Rav Yehuda said to me in the Nevuah, that the dispute between Rav and Rav Huna bar Chinna is referring to dipping foods in their brine. But with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine of each and every fish are recognizable. Yativ Rav Chinna bar Idi kamed Ravada bar Hava Yatev v'kamar goy shehevi areva mlea chaviot v'nimtzet kilbit ba'achat mehen pituchot kulan mutarot stumot hi moteret lekulan asurot amar lehem menalacha Mitelat Akrai Shamili Merav Ushmu Rav Yochanan. Rav Chinna bar Idi sat before Rav Ada bar Ahava and said, with regard to a Gentile who brought a boat that was full of barrels of fish brine, and a kilbit was found in one of the barrels, the halacha is as follows: if the barrels were open, they are all permitted. If they were closed, when the barrel with the keel beat is permitted, and all of the others are prohibited. Rav Ada bar Ahava said to him, from where do you know this? Rav Chinna bar Idi responded, I heard this from 3 verses, meaning great sages upon whom one can rely, as though their statements were recorded in verses. Rav and Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. Amar Rav Brona, Amar Rav. Kirve dagi ve'ubara ne nikachin elad min ha-mumche. Ramli le ula l'Rabi Dostai demin bere. Midik Amar Rav kirve dagim ve'ubaran ne nikachin elad min ha-mumche. Miklal de dag tameh itle uba. Uremini Dag tameh mashritz dag dahor metin betzim. The Gemara discusses the halacha with regard to other parts of fish. Rav Bruna says, that Rav says, fish intestines and their roe may be purchased only from an expert. Ula raises a contradiction to Rabbi Dostai of Biri, from the fact that Rav says fish intestines and their roe may be purchased only from an expert. It may be inferred that a non-kosher fish has roe, as otherwise there would be no reason to permit only roe purchased from an expert. And the Gemara raises a contradiction to this claim from the following Braita: a non-kosher fish gives birth, whereas a kosher fish lays eggs. Simi Mikan Ubhan Amar Rabbi Zera lo tisme tarvayu metile betzim ninu era ze mashritz mi bachutz v'ze mashritz mi bifnim. Rabbi Dostai accepted his opinion and said, delete the phrase their roe from here. Rabbi Zera said to him, do not delete it, as both kosher and non-kosher fish are fish that lay, meaning produce eggs, but this kosher fish propagates externally by laying eggs in the water, which later hatch, and that non-kosher fish propagates internally by keeping the eggs in its own body until they develop. Nevertheless, both produce roe, and there is therefore reason to be concerned that a Jew might purchase non-kosher roe. Lama limonche לבדוק בסימנים. דתני כסימני בעצם כך, סימני דגים. סימני דגים זה לא כדאי. סימני דגים זה נפיר וקסגז. סימבהו אלא כסימני בעצם כך, סימני עוברי דגים. The Gemara asks, but even so, why do I need an expert? Let one check the signs of kashrut on the roe himself. As is taught in Braita, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish. The Gemara interjects, does it enter your mind to say that the signs of kashrut for fish are the same as signs of kashrut for eggs? This is not so, as the signs of kosher fish are the possession of fins and scales, as written in the Torah with regard to them. Rather, the Braita means to say, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish roe. Ve'elu hein simani beitzim kol shekoderes ve'agul goles rosha echad kach kad rosha echad kad ve'rosha echad chad tehora shnei roshea chadin ושני ראשיה קדין טמאה חלבון מבחוץ וחלבון מבפנים טמאה חלבון מבחוץ וחלבון מבפנים טהור חלבון וחלמון מעורבים זה בזה זו היא ביצת השרץ אמר רבא כשנים מוחו. The Braita continues, and these are the signs of bird eggs, any egg that narrows at the top and is rounded, so that one of its ends is wide and the other one of its ends is pointed is kosher. If both ends are sharp or both ends are wide, it is not kosher. If the yolk is on the outside and the abdomen is on the inside, it is not kosher. If the abdomen is on the outside and the yolk is on the inside, it is kosher. If the yolk and abdomen are mixed with each other, this is the egg of a creeping animal. Considering that one can easily determine the kashrut of such eggs, why are only those purchased from an expert permitted? Rava says, Rav's ruling refers specifically to a case where the eggs have melted together and it is impossible to determine whether or not they are kosher based on these signs. The Gemara asks, but according to the opinion of Rabbi Dostai of Biri, who accepted the idea that non-kosher fish do not lay eggs and says, delete from here the phrase their roe, it is difficult. Now we turn to 40b, top of the page, with the words Ve'atanya, Kisimane betzim kach, simane uvrei dagim, lav tarotzim tabtzarela, kach simane kivrei dagim. The Gemara elaborates, but isn't it taught in the Braita as it was interpreted above, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish roe? Apparently, this Braita assumes that non-kosher fish roe also exists. The Gemara answers, didn't you yourself find it necessary to explain and reinterpret the Braita as it cannot be understood according to its straightforward meaning? Rabbi Dostai can also explain the Braita so that it effectively reads like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish intestines. Accordingly, the Braita never actually mentions fish roe at all. For a brief break, brief hafsakah, and we'll be back. The Gemara raises a difficulty. The Gemara raises a difficulty. But where do you find that one of the signs of fish intestines is that they must be round and pointed? The Gemara answers, you find this with regard to the swim bladder of a fish, which is considered to be kosher if it is shaped like a kosher egg. Im ein sham mumche mai Amar Yehuda kevon amar ani malachtim mutarim Rav Nachman amar ad shiomar elu dagim ve'elu kirvehen or ilei Rav Yehuda le'ad Adalia kevon amar ani malachtim mutarin. The Gemara asks, if there is no expert there, and one cannot determine whether or not the fish roe is kosher, what is the halacha? Rav Yehuda says that once the seller says, I salted the fish from which this roe came, and they were kosher, the roe is permitted. Rav Nachman says the roe is prohibited until the seller shows kosher fish to the buyer and says, these are the fish, and these are their intestines. That is, the roe is permitted only if the seller can present the fish that produced it. The Gemara relates, Rav Yehuda instructed Adam, his attendant, once the seller says, I salted them, they are permitted. לא צריכה אלא לקראטין שבו. מהו דתימה? ניחוש דילמה תאמר בי כמשמלן תהאישתרוקה היא תאישתרוק ואתה בהדה. The Mishnah teaches, and the leaf of a chiltit plant is permitted. The Gemara asks, since the previous Mishnah 35b prohibited a sliver of chiltit only due to the concern that it might have been sliced with a non-kosher knife, isn't it obvious that a leaf which has not been sliced is permitted? The Gemara answers, it is necessary to teach this only with regard to the slivers of chiltit that might be found on the leaf, lest you say that one should be concerned that perhaps a Gentile might bring slivers sliced with a non-kosher knife and mix it with the slivers on the leaf. The Mishnah therefore teaches us that it is assumed that the slivers on the leaf had stuck to it and came off with the plant when it was pulled from the ground. וזיתי גלוסקאות המגולגלגין פשיטה. לא, נצרכה אף על גב דרפי טובה, מהו דתימה חמרה למה בהו כמשמען, אני מחבת משחה ודרפו. The Mishnah teaches, and rolled olive cakes, זיתי גלוסקאות. The Gemara asks, isn't it obvious that these are permitted? For what reason might they be prohibited? The Gemara answers, no, it is necessary to teach they are permitted, even though they are very soft, lest you say that there is a concern that they soften because the Gentile placed wine in them. And the Mishnah therefore teaches us that these olives have softened due to the oil they possess. Rav Yossi Omer, Shlachin Asirin, Hechidam Mishlachin, אמר רבי יוסי חנינא, כל שאוחזו בידו וגרענתו בגרעינתו נשמטת. The Mishnah further teaches, and Rabbi Yossi says, overripe olives are prohibited. The Gemara asks, what are overripe olives like? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chinina says, this is referring to any olive that if one grasps it in his hand, its pit slips out due to the softness of the olive. Ha-chagavin abayin kulo. Tanu Rabbanan, ha-chagavin veha-kaprisin, veha-kaflotot, habayin min ha-otzer, min ha-heftek, מן הספין המותרים, הנמכרים בקרקלוזה, לפני כן בני אסורים, מפני שמזלף יין עליהם. וכן יין תפוחים של גויים הבאים מן האוצר, ומן ההפתק, ומן הסלולה מותרים, הנמכר בקטלוזה אסור, מפני שמערבים bo yain. The Mishnah teaches locusts that come from a salesman's basket are prohibited, while those that come from the storeroom are permitted. The sages taught and bright to locusts and cape buds and leeks that come from the storehouse and from the storeroom and from a Gentile's ship are all permitted. Those that are sold in the market from baskets that are in front of the storekeeper are prohibited, because it is assumed that the Gentile storekeeper sprinkles wine upon them. And similarly, with regard to apple wine that belongs to Gentiles, those that come from the storehouse or from the storeroom or from a salesman's basket are permitted. Apple wine that is sold in the market is prohibited because they mix grape wine of Gentiles in it. Tanabanan. The Gemara cites a relevant braita. The sages taught. Pamachat chash Rabbi Bemeov Amar klum yesh adam yodei yain tapuchim shel goyim asur mutar Amar lechanom lishmoa ben Rabbi Yossi. Pamachat chash Abba Bemeov והביאו לו יין תפוחים של גויים של 70 שנה ושתה ונתרפא. אמר לו כל כך היה בידך ואתה מצרני. The sages taught once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi felt discomfort in his stomach and knew that apple wine would alleviate it, would help it. He said, isn't there any person who knows whether apple wine of Gentiles is prohibited or permitted? Rabbi Yishmael ben Ragosi said before him, once my father felt discomfort in his stomach, and they brought him apple wine of Gentiles that was 70 years old, and he drank it, and he was cured. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to him, you had so much knowledge in your hand, you could have relieved me, and yet you caused me to suffer by withholding it until now. Okay. Batku ומצאו גוי אחד שהיה לו 300 גר ויין של תפוחים של 70 שנה ושתה ונתרפא. אמר ברוך המקום שמסר עולמו ושומרים. They checked and they found one Gentile who had 300 large jugs of apple wine that was 70 years old, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi drank from it and was cured. He said, blessed is the omnipresent who delivered his universe to keepers. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi thanked God for causing the Gentile to keep the wine for 70 years so that it could be used to heal him. V'chein letruma, mai v'chein letruma. Amar Rav Sheshet, v'chein lekohen achashud למכור תרומה לשם חולין. לפניו הוא דאסור, אבל הבא מן האוצר, מן ההפתק ומן הסלולה מותר. Irtote, mitrat, mirtat, savar, shami, berabanan, umafsidu. In brackets it says umafsidi. Le minai, mianai. Our Mishnah teaches further. And likewise, with regard to Truma, the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the statement, and likewise with regard to Truma? Rav Sheshet says, this means, and likewise, the same halacha applies to a priest who is suspected of selling truma, which is less expensive, as non-sacred food. It is only when the food is in front of the priest that it is prohibited, but food that comes from the storehouse or from the storeroom or from a sales basket is permitted. The reason is that the priest is fearful because he thinks to himself, if I sell truma in public, the sages will hear of it and deprive me of all my wares. May we return to you, chapter one may not place. And now we start the new chapter of Kol HaTzilamim. Kol HaTzilamim, the Mishnah says, Kol HaTzilamim Asurim, Mipnei shein nevadim pam achat b'shana. Divrei Rabbi Meir, וחכמים האומרים, אינו אסור, אלא כל שיש בידו מקל, או ציפור, או כדור. רבי שמעון בן גמליאל אומר, אף כל שיש בידו כל דבר. All statues are forbidden, meaning it's prohibited to derive benefit from them because they are worshipped at least once a year. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say the only type of statue that is forbidden is any statue that has in its hand a staff or a bird or an orb, as these are indications that the statue is designated for idolatry. If the statue is holding a different item, it may be assumed that the statue was fashioned for ornamental purposes and not for worship. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says it is prohibited to derive benefit even from any statue that has any item whatsoever in its hand. And now, the Gemara, the Talmud says, the Gemara says, if it is true that the statues to which Rabbi Meir is referring are worshipped at least once a year, what is the reason for the opinion of the rabbis to permit deriving benefit from them? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Bimkomo shel Rabbi Meir, Hayu ovdin ota pa'am achat b'shana, v'Rabbi Meir lichayesh lemi'uta, gazar shar mekomot atu oto makom. ורבנן דלא חיה שהיא למיעוטה, לא גזרו שאר מקומות עטו אותו מקום. The Gemara says, if it is true that the statues to which Rabbi Meir is referring are worshipped at least once a year, what is the reason for the opinion of the rabbis who permitted deriving benefit from them? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef said, that Rabbi Yochanan says, in Rabbi Meir's locale, people would worship statues once a year. And therefore, Rabbi Meir, who maintains that one must be concerned for a minority occurrence, the Avodah 61b issued a decree that statues are forbidden even in other places due to that locale where people would worship statues. And the rabbis, by contrast, who do not maintain that one must be concerned for a minority occurrence, did not issue a decree that the statues are forbidden even in other places due to that locale. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel באינדרתי של מלאכים שנינו. אמר רב בר חנא אמר רבי יוחנן ובעומדין על פתח מדינה שנינו. Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says we learned that this dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis is only with regard to the statues of kings. Rabbi Meir decreed that they are forbidden as perhaps they were designated for worship. The rabbis assumed that they were designated for ornamental purposes and not for worship. Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, furthermore, we learned that the dispute is only with regard to statues that stand at the entrance to the region. Since these statues were erected in an important location, there is concern that they are worshipped.